I hope you are still doing well. Today, we are going to learn about the animals of the freshwater habitat. Now, all of our other habitats that we've learned about so far have been pretty much land habitats. So think about the title of this story, Animals of the Freshwater Habitat. Do you think that this story is going to be a little bit different than the ones that we've read before? Let's find out. Alright, so what have we already learned? Remember that the globe is going to show us both land and water that make up our planet Earth, right? You see the blue, that is your water, and then the green, or when we were talking about the Arctic tundra, and in our earlier read-alouds, the land was white. But we've learned about the land. Most of the habitats that we've talked about have been land. Today, we are going to learn about another water habitat. So even though we have talked mostly about land habitats, we did talk about the Arctic Ocean. So today we're going to learn about another water habitat called the freshwater habitat. Freshwater is water that does not have very much salt in it. It is often water that people can drink. I mean, you would still have to clean it, but it's not going to have all that salt in it. A freshwater habitat is different from the water habitat found in the Arctic Ocean, which is called a saltwater habitat. And we're going to learn more about that at another time. Water found in oceans is salty, and therefore it's not for drinking. You don't want to drink salt water. Ew, gross. This picture shows a whole bunch of different kinds of freshwater habitats, like rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds. I want you to think about some freshwater habitats that you have seen or that are near us. So if you have a pond in your backyard, or a stream, or if you've ever been to a lake or a river, think about those. Now, I want you to listen carefully to find out the different kind of plants and animals that live in a freshwater habitat. Hello again. Glad you could join me. I thought that we needed a real change, so I've come off dry land to a place where it's wet all the time. A lake. A lake is an area of water that is surrounded by land or has land all around it. There is a lot of water in the world. In fact, water covers most of the Earth's surface, but only a tiny part of the world's water is fresh water, the kind of water that you and I can drink because it has very little salt in it. Fresh water is found in streams, rivers, lakes, and ponds. The water in these streams, rivers, lakes, and ponds come from rain and from melting ice and snow. Isn't it amazing to think that the water from the drinking fountain at school or from the faucets in your house all come from rain? I'm here at the water's edge, or where the water and the land meet, to explore this lake and the plants and animals that call this freshwater habitat home. Freshwater habitats have many kinds of fish, birds, insects, and other animals. Standing here, I can see an enormous or very big leaf in the water. Let me climb onto it so we can get a closer look. This is a water lily leaf. Okay, here's the water lily leaf. And there are the water lilies. A water lily is a plant that lives in water near the edges of ponds and lakes. Plants are important in freshwater habitats because they make oxygen for animals to breathe. Plants are also food for the animals to eat, and they can provide shelter to protect animals from their predators. Remember that a predator is an animal that hunts other animals. The leaves of the water lily are very large, round, and green, and they float on the surface of the water. If the leaves float on the surface of the water, that means that they can stay on top of the water and they don't sink. The water lily is well adapted for living in its habitat. Like the kapok trees in the rainforest, the lily's large leaves let it get as much sunlight as it needs for food and energy. Lilies are also found in food for many animals, believe it or not. Animals like deer, porcupine, beaver, and turtles all eat the leaves, whereas ducks and geese like to eat the roots. Some animals like fish and frogs use the lily leaves as hiding places, and the flowers bring bees and other insects. I am going to float around the edge of the lake of this water lily leaf, but I'm going to have to leave soon because this pesky turtle will not leave my leaf alone. I've pushed out from the edge of the lake a little, and I already can see another kind of plant that lives here. It's called a cattail, and it gets its name from the unusual way it looks. Thankfully for me, it doesn't have much to do with real cats. Cattails have long, thin stems with foot-long, furry flower spikes at the top that turn from green in the early summer to brown in the fall. The flower spike feels soft and furry and looks a little like a cat's tail, but I think it more looks like a hot dog. What do you guys think? Do you think it looks like a hot dog or like a cat's tail? The plants can reach up to 9 feet in height, which lets them get as much sunlight as they need. As with water lilies, some animals use cattails for food and shelter. Muskrats and geese, this is a muskrat, and these are your geese, like to eat the roots of the cattail, and the juicy green shoots are a favorite of the moose and elk. So here is your moose, and here is your elk. They, like caribou, are part of the deer family. Many kinds of birds make their home among these cattails. It's very hard to see anything in there because cattails grow so thickly, so it's a good place for birds to build their nests and lay and hatch their eggs. Predators like snakes and frogs also live among the cattails and search for animals like birds and insects for food. I think I'm going to move on now. As you know, I'm not very good with snakes. Come with me beneath the water and let's take a look at what's under there. Here are some nice-looking rainbow trout. Fish can only live in water, and they breathe underwater using gills on the sides of their bodies. Gills take in oxygen from the water around them. Fish have strong tails that they use for swimming and fins that they use for steering and balance. The rainbow trout is a carnivore. Remember, a carnivore is an animal that eats other animals. It eats other water animals like insects, other fish, and sometimes shellfish. It even eats some small land animals like mice if it gets the chance, so I'm sure it wouldn't mind a nibble of a rat. Rainbow trout like to live in rivers, but some prefer the deeper water of big lakes. What do you guys see in this picture? I enjoyed exploring beneath the surface of the water, and now I'm going to rest on a lily pad again while I'm drying off a bit. Let me show you a kind of frog called a bullfrog that I can see sitting at the water's edge. Frogs are amphibious, which means they live both in water and on land. Bullfrogs are the largest kind of frog found in North America, and they can grow more than half a foot long and weigh more than a pound. That's a really big frog! The bullfrog gets its name from the loud cow-like noise it makes. A male cow is called a bull. What sound does a cow make? I bet birds and turtles would be pretty surprised to know that a frog can make such a loud sound. Pretty neat, huh? This bullfrog is resting now, but it will come out to hunt when it gets dark. Bullfrogs eat lots of different kinds of food. They are carnivores, so they eat small fish, snakes, birds, and insects like this dragonfly that's buzzing about my head. This is an adult dragonfly. Adult means grown up. Adult dragonflies are flying insects with long bodies and wings. Dragonflies live around lakes, streams, and other freshwater habitats because they lay their eggs in water. Adult dragonflies eat other insects like mosquitoes, flies, and bees. The dragonfly uses its long wings to hover around in the air or stay in one place while flying, where it catches food. It has to be careful because the bullfrog isn't the only one that likes to eat dragonflies. Birds and turtles like to eat them too. The water is getting a little rough out here. Ah, that's why. Here come some birds that like to eat insects too. These are a kind of duck called mallards. Ducks are birds that can live both in and out of water, but it's the water where they spend most of their time. Like all birds, ducks, like these mallards, are covered in feathers. Did you know that the duck's feathers are waterproof? If something is waterproof, it keeps the water out. Ducks rub special oil from their tails all over their feathers because the oil and water don't mix. Water drips right off the ducks without getting their feathers wet. Ducks floating on the surface of the water have large webbed feet that help them paddle. They dip their heads under the water and use their beaks, which are called bills, to search for food at the bottom of the lake. Here, the word bill refers to the duck's beaks. Mallards eat grasses and seeds from plants, and small animals like insects, worms, snails, frogs, and small fish. Well, I've had a good look around this freshwater habitat, but I have to get off this lily before these ducks knock me off. There's another kind of water habitat, and we're going to have to look at it next time. I hope you'll join me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to start my long trip back to shore. So, let me ask you this. Is most of the Earth's water fresh water or salt water? Think about the globe. What kind of water do you see a lot of on the globe? So you see a lot of the ocean. So is the ocean salt water or fresh water? Salt water. So do you think that most of the water on Earth is going to be salt water or fresh water? That's right. It's going to be salt water. I want you to tell someone in your house something about freshwater habitat. It might be the temperature of it, it might be what kind of plants and animals live there, how those animals and plants may have adapted. Okay, examples of freshwater habitats. Go ahead, pause the video and go tell your family. All right. What are some plants that live in those freshwater habitats? You're right, water lilies and cattails. What kind of animals live in freshwater habitats? Fish, like rainbow trout, birds like ducks, insects like dragonflies, bees, mosquitoes, and flies, frogs like bullfrogs, deer, porcupines, beavers, turtles, muskrats, geese. There's a whole bunch, right? How are those dragonflies adapted to live in a freshwater habitat? That's right. Dragonflies lay their eggs in water, and they eat insects that live in freshwater habitats like mosquitoes, flies, and bees. Why are water lilies so important to freshwater habitats? That's right. They provide oxygen for animals to breathe and food for them to eat. The leaves of the water lilies are very good hiding places for animals like fish and frogs, and the flowers attract bees and other insects. During that read aloud, you heard me say the leaves of the water lily are very large, round, and green, and they float on the surface of the water. I want you to say the word float. You can whisper it, mouse voice it, monster voice it, deep voice it, however you want. Go. Float. Float. If things float on water, that means they can stay on top of the water without sinking. In the summer, I like to float in the pool. What other things float in water? I want you to try to use the word float when you tell about it. What's the word we've been talking about? You're right, float. I'm going to describe a situation. If it is an example of something that does float, I want you to say, that floats. If it's not an example of something that floats, I want you to say, that does not float. The leaf fell from the tree and landed on the surface of the water. That floats. Harry threw a rock and it sank to the bottom of the pond. No, that does not float. If it's sinking to the bottom, it's not on top of the water, it's not on the surface, so it's got to be sinking, which is not floating. The boat rocked gently back and forth on top of the waves. You're right, that floats. The dolphin dove deep into the ocean. It does not float. There are many pennies under the water at the bottom of the water fountain. That does not float. Remember, if they're on the bottom, then they're not floating. All right, guys, go ahead, head over to Google Classroom, figure out what your assignment is for this read aloud, and I will be talking to you soon about another type of water habitat. Bye.